listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
We've covered a lot of ground in this interview. We navigate the landscape of the very cool things our bodies can do, from climbing mountains to giving birth, and our inherent ability to resent, judge, and even hate those very cool bodies that are carrying us through this life. Swimsuit season is around the corner, ladies. Raise your hand if you've already thought about it, or if you don't even think about it, because when was the last time you actually got in your swimsuit and did a cannonball into that pool? We're going to talk about that today, and a bunch of little touch points about how we view our bodies and how we unconsciously show our kids how to think about their bodies. I think we've got some really good stuff today to help us all think a little differently. This interview is packed with so much good stuff that we split it into 2 episodes, so make sure to catch them both. Enjoy. Today, we're talking to Stasia Savasuk of Stasia's Style School. She's a style coach and body positivity advocate who ushers women from feelings of insignificance, body shame, and a perpetual state of why bother into radically embracing who they are and who they want to be, and encouraging them to fully show up in the world. She describes herself: I am a cheerleader of women, an advocate of authenticity, a learner and teacher of my children. I'm a truth teller, a laugher, a nature lover, and a 44-year-old bikini wearer who can do hard things. Stasia, welcome to the Today's Mama podcast.
Thank you so much, Rachel.
And we were just talking right before we started recording about how I always get reminders of not clicking my pen or clapping my hands while we're talking. So as I read that, because I felt really celebratory myself about your bio, I had to put my hands in my pockets.
I had to put my hands in my pockets too.
Seriously, I'm like sitting here in my hoodie with my hands in my pockets. So, and I have a feeling I'm going to have to keep them there because we have so much fun stuff to talk about that I think I'm going to want to clap all the time. So, well, let's get started. You live in rural Vermont, which looks absolutely amazing and was probably absolutely cold this week. How is your weather?
You know, the last few days, it's been around 50 degrees. So we're having a heat wave.
What?
I know, we're having a heat wave.
How did you miss the polar vortex?
We had it. We were 0 4 days ago, and now we're 50. So we just had a 50-degree weather swing, which is bananas.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, think about that. If it were summer, it'd be like 90 to 40. That's dramatic.
Totally. That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. So all that snow and ice just melted in 2 seconds.
Well, we still had a lot of snow and we still have a lot of ice, but it's melting. So when I go outdoors, my nose hairs don't freeze on the inside when I take a breath in. So this is awesome. It's quite nice.
I have had that sensation. Like, I remember the first time I felt it, I was in 5th grade, and I live in Utah, so our winters can get cold, but like honestly, not like you guys up in the Northeast.
Yeah.
But I remember walking out of my house and my nose hairs freezing, and I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to fall out. Like, how do they stay connected to my body?
I know.
It's so weird. Okay, what's the best thing about living in Vermont? Because it looks so beautiful.
You know, the best part of living in Vermont for me is the community. It's the community, it's the culture, it's the openness, the acceptance. I feel as though Vermont is a little bit like it's a little utopian in that it just, I just love it here so much. I love the energy of the place and the space. I love the ethic of the people that I live with and live around in terms of their own connection to place and space and reverence for the earth that we live on and reverence for each other and for inclusion and diversity and all the things that make life fulfilling. Really, I mean, Vermont encapsulates and embodies all of it. I feel so fortunate to live in Vermont. I don't love the winters. I have to be honest. So
yeah, when does winter wear off?
I feel like Vermont has like 9-month winters. My husband doesn't agree with me, but we have different definitions of what summer is for sure. I would say winter for me goes until like through April.
Yeah, I feel you, girl.
You know, if there's snow on the ground and I'm not wearing sandals, it's winter.
Yeah.
That's kind of my definition.
Yeah.
If I have the heat on, it's winter. If I don't have the heat on, it's summer. So we have the heat on usually from September to May. So,
Yeah. We've had snow here on Memorial Day before.
oh yeah.
Not so much lately. We, like many places on the planet, have been heating up for a while. So our weather has looked a little
Yeah.
different to
Yeah.
me over time. But I start to feel better about February every year
Yeah.
because the days get longer and I feel a little more sunshine in my life.
A little more sunshine. Yes. I can go outside at 4 o'clock and it's not dark out, and that does feel good.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that feels good. But it's cold and I want to go out and do things at night, but I'm like, you know what? It's just too cold. I don't want to go outside sometimes. So,
Yeah.
but one of the things that shifted for us is I've resisted Vermont winters for a long time. And what really has made a difference is being active in the winter and doing the winter hikes that we do.
Yes. And that's a big deal in Utah because we have so much outdoor recreation in terms of
Yeah.
skiing and sledding and, going on a hike or whatever it is. And
Yep. Yep.
for a long time, I would just be like, yeah, I'm not going on a walk today in my neighborhood. It's just
Yep.
cold. And so now I just bundle up and I'm definitely going on more walks when it's cold.
Yeah, it's getting the right gear to be outdoors and not be cold. So we can go for a hike now. We hike every Sunday as a family.
Yes.
We got all the gear for all of us so that we can get out and be out when it's 5 degrees and be warm and be comfortable and not be miserable. So I think a big shift for me in terms of enjoying the winter is doing a thing in the winter that we do together as a family where I have the right gear and my feet aren't wet, my fingers aren't freezing. You know what I mean? Just sort of setting myself up to be successful in the winter and get outside and enjoy it has been really pretty awesome.
Yes. Now, you've mentioned, so this Sunday hike you take with your family, you go no
Yeah.
matter what. So describe the conditions you have hiked in with your kids in tow.
Well, we hike year round in Vermont. So we've been out in mosquito season, black fly season. We have multiple seasons in Vermont. So
Black fly season, that sounds like the worst thing ever.
oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. So, and there's tick season, which is a big one now.
Okay, I am taking back my desire to move to Vermont.
Weather-wise, I prefer being out west. I have to be honest. But we get out, when the mosquitoes are so thick, and that can be really challenging for the kids. We get out when it's super hot and it's super muggy. We get out when it's pouring buckets. We get out when it's 5 degrees. We get out if it's freezing rain. We get out if it's snow. Like, it doesn't matter. We hike on Sundays. And before we started this as a tradition, it would be like, oh, it's too windy, it's too rainy, it's too snowy, it's too hot, it's too buggy. And we would never go outside 5 days a year. We would have the perfect weather, right? But because now we commit to it, there is no exception. We've learned, your tolerance grows, your resilience grows, your tenacity grows. It's really being able to face any weather condition. We've turned into like this pretty tough hiker family. I gotta tell you, it's been awesome.
Dude, you guys are ready to go out with Bear Grylls.
Yeah. We can just be out there all the time, no matter what. It's awesome and we love it. Well, we don't all love it. They whine and complain and cranky. My kids they're not angels. They still get cranky, but we hold them to it and we keep going, and they're always proud after. That's what's awesome.
Yes. Now, you've said when we hike together, we are able to teach our kids about resilience, tenacity, bravery, and reverence. So I think we talked a little bit about what hiking in terms of enduring and conquering and moving through the weather, right? But what else about hiking? What is it that teaches your family those lessons?
One of the things when I think about, like, reverence is a big one for me. I think when you're out in the natural world and you're hiking a big mountain and you see the way other people behave when you're in the mountains, it gives you pause. We've been outside hiking, on the top of a big peak, and we see teenage boys throwing rocks at birds or writing, graffitiing canyon walls when we were out west doing, a trip out west. Or, whenever we see people being disrespectful to the earth, my kids pick up on it without me needing to say or do anything. So I don't need to, It's almost as if I don't need to teach them reverence. They learn it on their own. They see litter in the woods and they say, why? Why would people do this? Because they have developed a respect for their place and space. And so they protect it on their own and they become advocates on their own because it's a place we spend so much time, and they can feel the difference when it's littered and graffitied as opposed to when it's natural and pure. You know what I mean?
Yes. And there is a physical reverence, I think, that also accompanies the outdoors, right? There is a quiet that you feel when you're out there. In many instances, regardless of how many people are there, there's just a different kind of quiet that you experience.
Well, what would be how would I say it? Like non-distracted quiet. So we live in a world where we're constantly beeped and dinged and vibrated,
Yep.
There's all that input. And so when you're out and you're not receiving all that input, or you're not anticipating it or waiting for it.
Yeah, whether you want to or not. In most cases, like your cell service is going to, fall away very quickly.
It's the quiet, and it allows, I don't know for everybody, but when we're home, we're just moving 1,000 miles an hour. Always something's happening, somebody's homework, do this, clean this, that. When we get outside, it's just us. And there's no tasks to be done except for, what emerges. And so we can be quiet for 5 minutes and then somebody speaks and we can all stop and listen. We can all hear. We can all be present for something, where otherwise I'm a pretty distracted mama. Not something I'm super proud of, but it allows me that time to be not distracted and really pay attention and tune into my kids and to my husband and to our family dynamic. It's where we have our best conversations. It's where we grow together the most, where we challenge each other, where we support each other the best. All our best familying happens when we're in the mountains, for sure.
So I literally just wrote in my notebook with 3 underlines, hiking this week. I'm putting it on the calendar.
It's really done so much for our family and the way we relate together. It's where the stories come out, of what happened at school on Tuesday when so-and-so hurt your feelings. It's that place and that space where we have the time and the quiet and the lack of distraction to have those conversations that we don't make time for during the week because we're busy like everybody else is busy, because we live in this over-busy world. So it's our chance to become unbusy.
Yes. Now, tell everybody, how old are your kids?
My kids are 6 and 11.
Yeah. So it's not like you have, 15, 16-year-old athletes that you're running up a mountain. I mean,
no. And we've been doing this now every Sunday for a year and a half. We've skipped a few because of big events or, something has come up. But for the most part, we go and we started when my little guy just turned 6. He was 4.5 when we started. We had him hiking 3, 4, 5, 6-mile days when he was 4 years old. And we've been through lots of lay down crying fits where we sit and we wait as a family for half an hour and say, okay, well, when you're done, we're going to start hiking. We're not turning around,
Yep.
And I just took the kids hiking on Sunday, and the whole way up, my son was like, oh, mama, I can't. I'm so tired. And I was like, well, you're going to feel good when we get done, And he was whining. I mean, it was hard for me because I was like, how are you still whining at this point? We do this all the time. Just stop already. But he whined and he complained and it was a struggle, but we don't turn around unless it's a safety issue, because I think it does build that resilience and that tenacity.
Yes.
And then he says, Mama, I didn't know I could be that strong.
That's huge.
It's huge. It teaches the kids that they can do hard things. We don't need to say it to them. You can do hard things. We put them in a position where they can do it, and we're there to support each other as a family. Everybody has a bad hiking day where you're crinkly and your bones don't bend good and, you're crampy or you're extra tired. But if we could work together as a family and support each other, we can realize that together we can do hard things. I think it builds that resilience and that tenacity and that, I have my today body is a strong body. It's building that connection with yourself and what you're capable of doing instead of leaning into that sort of give up nature.
Yes. And you also just described how I think I feel lately, which is crinkly.
Yes, that's my bones. They
Yeah,
crinkle
like my
now.
boat, just a little like cracking in my
Yeah,
knees, my hammies might snap. I don't know.
yeah.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
A lot of people ask what natural solutions and alternatives there are for anxiety, and it's something we end up talking about with lots of guests on the show. Side note, be sure to check out episode number 4 with Dr. Meg Meeker. It's all about anxiety. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not giving you medical advice, but I will tell you what works at our house. We've been taking a micronutrient designed for the brain to help with calm, mood, and focus. It's backed by studies in over 25 scientific journals, and I'll tell you, it's helped a lot. My teenage daughter has a tough time falling asleep at night. I picture a tiny little hamster running around in her brain, telling her what to worry about. If she takes 2 Q-Max each morning, she falls right asleep, no problem. And she even brought me her math grade to show me that she'd brought it from a C to an A and told me she felt like it was because when she takes her vitamins, it's easier for her to sit still in class. Now, it's not for everyone, but if you want to give it a shot, you can use the coupon code 20TODAYSMAMA to get 20% off your order on Amazon. I'll put a link in the show notes, or you can just search for Q-Max on Amazon. Again, that code is 20TODAYSMAMA, 20TODAYSMAMA to get 20% off your order on Amazon. Back to the show.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
Now, aside from some obvious, like you got to pack, snacks and make sure you have enough water, what are your most important pieces of gear or preparation that you would recommend to other families who are ready to commit to hiking every week?
I would say one of the first things is make sure your kids carry their own backpacks.
Yes.
Because we will go hiking and sometimes my husband and I will have all the gear, but the kids are carrying their backpacks because they're going to probably take something off or collect something. And I'm not carrying that stuff, So it's like you bring a backpack, you carry a backpack. I want you to get used to having a backpack on your body because eventually we're not going to be able to carry everything for you. And I don't want to, when they get older, say, okay, now it's I want them to have that. When I hike, I carry a backpack. Like I want to instill that in them now. And then it always happens once you start heating up, a jacket comes off, the mittens comes off, the hat comes off. And then I'm stuck with, everybody's gear. It's too much.
Sherpaing your family up the trail.
Sherpaing everything. Absolutely. So backpack, make sure your kids have a good backpack, I think is essential. And then in winter, I think having, again, the right gear is critical, like the right good socks, the right boots. In the winter, we hike with micro spikes. So we went out yesterday. We had our everything. They make a huge difference. It changes, even for me, because I feel crinkly, I'm more hesitant when I'm walking on a slippery, icy surface, right? Well, when I put on my micro spikes, I can just cruise and it feels so good to be solid on my feet and not worry about falling and breaking my bottom,
Yep, you are a champion in microspikes, and they are not that expensive. You can get really nice ones for like $75, or you can find some for 15 or 20 bucks on Amazon that work just as great.
Work just as fine. And you can get them on sale. I got a set at the thrift store for $3. I was dancing in the store when I found micro spikes for $3. I was like, what? This is amazing. I can't believe it. So yeah, we've got them when we've got extras for if people come with us. So winter micro spikes, essential, good gear, good polypro long johns, expensive, totally worth it. In summer, do water. Like I feel like you don't need anything but water. And if you live in the Northeast, tick spray. That's why don't leave home without your tick spray or your bug spray.
Yeah. Thank the heavens that we don't have ticks here in Utah. I mean, we probably do, but not the way you guys deal with them in the East.
It is when I grew up, there, like, I didn't even, never. I spent a lot of time outside as a kid, and never had I ever even heard of or seen a tick until I was in like almost 30 years old. So they're a pretty recent development here in the Northeast.
Okay, so where did you grow up?
I grew up in Maine.
Okay, so same kind of climate and environment.
Totally the same. Yep, it's all up in the Northeast. And like ticks just weren't a thing. And now it's terrible. I've had Lyme a few times. My husband has had Lyme. My ZZ, I think this last summer I pulled 4 or 5 embedded ticks out of him.
I am gasping and cringing.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. They're awful. It's really ugly. I mean, out of work. My husband was out of work for almost 2-3 weeks. Wicked bad.
First of all, what do you do when you find a tick? And then the second piece of that is, how do you like prevent or kind of be proactive about the Lyme disease component?
Well, when you find a tick, they have special tick tweezers to get them out because you've got to get their whole body out. So you got to like pick them out. You can send them off to a lab to have them tested to see if they are carrying Lyme or what other infections they can be carrying. We never do that because usually I pick it out and then somebody sneezes and then the tick disappears or something happens. I never know where it is after I get it out. So that just doesn't happen for us. But what we do in terms of tick prevention is we have some spray, some like natural stuff that we spray on ourselves. And we do that. And we do tick checks. I think the number one most important thing you can do are tick checks. Because if you can get them off your body before they embed, you're in good shape. If you can get them off your body quickly after they embed, you should be in pretty good shape. So a lot of people will go out with their pants tucked into their socks, with their gloves tucked in. I can't do all that stuff. That's too much. I still like to be free in my body. So we just do frequent tick checks. That's our strategy.
Okay, so that's what happens when I go to Vermont.
Yeah.
I am adopting your tick prevention strategy.
Yes. Good spray and tick checks. I think a lot of people just go the tick check route, just constantly looking. You can get paranoid. Every time you have a little tickle, you're like, it must be a tick. But often it's not.
I would be living in that paranoia for sure. Okay, well, let's bounce back to your childhood in Maine. Like we said, sounds like a similar environment, but now dedicated listeners will know where I'm going next. And that is, what was your ratatouille, the sight, the smell, or the sound that takes you back to being a kid?
It would be the smell of a lake. Anytime I smell a lake, it brings me back to my youth, to my childhood. You know the smell of a lake?
So, and I'm curious how our lakes would smell different, because here I have a really stinky Great Salt Lake. And then I have mountain lakes, which smell a little different because it's high altitude.
Right.
And so the air's a little thinner and there's a pine kind of smell to it. But I feel like you guys are blessed with so many cool lakes and maybe a little more humidity than I've got here. So yeah.
Yes, for sure. So it's a very earthy, groundy smell, right? There's like, it's a little, well, oftentimes the lakes are, in the forest, like within the forest. I grew up. We had a camp on a lake, and so most of my childhood was spent. We say it in New England, up to camp, UPTA. It's like a word, UPTA. So we all had up to camp, and it's that like the piney forest floor smell with.
It's a little rotten, don't you think? Just like a little moldy.
Rotten. I was like, it's a little bit. I was gonna say like mildewy, almost.
Yeah, there's some rot that goes with that.
There's rot. It's the forest floor, the decomposition. When you're near the lake, it's like the edge of the lake always has a little bit of a smell, And that, I grew up in lakes, always in lakes, and that's like my happy places on the lake, in the lake, on the lake, swimming in the lake, fishing in the lake, ice skating on the lake, always just on the lake is my favorite.
Oh my gosh. And tell me you probably were just rope swinging into the lake all the time.
Yeah. Like what? We all do that. What are you talking about? You don't do that in Utah?
You come from a Norman Rockwell painting. Okay, I am jealous. All right, now describe, as we're talking about childhood and youth, describe yourself as a teenage girl. See, because this is a tough question, because we're going to talk body positivity today, right? And in that vision of you as a teenage girl, I'm just going to add a question to that. How did you feel about yourself and your body?
I hated my body when I was a teenager. And it's funny because I was thin. No, I was skinny. I was skinny, skinny, skinny. And I used to be made fun of all the time for my skinniness, right? Which is different than what you usually think of when people get made fun of, right? And it was, the comments would be like, oh, I bumped into Stasia. I got a paper cut. That I used to get that all the time. I got a paper cut. And I would eat, but I was a runner, and I always wore like big things to try to hide my skinniness.
And this is a funny issue because we ignore this side of the weight issue for kids.
Oh, we totally do.
I have a skinny kid, girl. She started 7th grade at 60 pounds and under 5 feet. She has been nicknamed stick bug, stick figure, all the different things. I mean, there's worse things to be called in the world, right? But one day we were on a walk and it made me cry because she said, Mom, sometimes when people say those things to me, and then maybe sometimes when I see myself in a picture, I don't even look human. And that's how it makes me feel. And how much that started to run in the back of her mind, And her friends would say, who probably, were bigger or taller, maybe hit puberty before her, were probably having issues on the other end where they're like, I'm so much bigger than you and I feel bigger and that makes me feel bad. Therefore, I'm going to point some things out like, you're not healthy. You probably have an eating disorder or things like that to make themselves feel a little better, right? So there's a weird interaction that goes around there around super skinny.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I've learned is that nobody is exempt from body shame. It doesn't matter what your body is.
Yes.
You're going to get it one way or the other. There is no opt out. It doesn't matter if you're skinny, if you've got all the right curves and all the right places according to society standards. If you're it just doesn't matter. Shame is one size fits all. It just is. Body shame is available to everybody. And it's awful. It's terrible. It's awful. And I get and I work, with the work that I do with women now, I'm seeing this shame 30, 40, 50, 60 years later that all developed when they were 10 years old.
Okay, so I was just going to ask, how did you carry those feelings and that shame into your adulthood? Because I can tell you, I think my own is still with me. That voice that is there, that was there, is still there. So how has that gone with you into adulthood?
It has been like a permanent passenger in my brain is what it's been. And it's changed because first I was too skinny, and then my genetics, I have been cellulite, like my thighs and my bottom, like my butt, like cellulite, right down to my knees. Even when I weighed 100 pounds, I had cellulite. So people would be like, you're like skinny fat, Stasia. And I'm like,
oh, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So like, oh, Stasia, you surprised me with how much cellulite you have. You're so skinny, but you're so fat. Like those were the comments. So it was always something, right? So then I became the shame that overtook me because this sounds even ridiculous. Like I'm embarrassed to say it out loud, but like skinny fat, like a skinny with fat, skinny fat. I don't even know. It's like, I don't even know how to say it without feeling ridiculous.
No, I think everybody knows what that is.
So having like this very slender body with like more cellulite than almost anybody that I knew. And I remember I would go to the gym and I would work out 2 hours a day and I had a trainer and I'd be like, why? Why can I do all this? And how can I not make the cellulite go away? And I remember, and he was like,
yeah, genetics, like they're kind of a jerk, right?
Genetics, baby. Yeah, it was just like genetics. But the thing that nobody ever said to me was, it's not a problem, Stasia. Instead of just, it's your genetics, deal with it. But it's not a problem. Don't make something a problem. That's not a problem. Nobody ever told me my cellulite was not a problem. It was always a problem. Oh, sorry, you have that. That must be really hard for you, right? Validating the fact that cellulite is a problem. And
as if it's a terminal illness.
I know. And now I'm like, people say things to me and I was like, if I had swastikas tattooed all over my bottom, that's a problem. Cellulite, not a problem, right? Like, let's talk about what the problems are in this world. The cellulite on my bottom is not one of those problems. I get so crazy. But when I think about how I grew up with it, I mean, I don't know. I think this may ring true for a lot of women. When I was 20 years old, I wished for my 18-year-old body, and I hated my 20-year-old body. When I was 30, I would look back at photos of my 20-year-old body and say, oh, man, I looked pretty good back then, but I hated my 30-year-old body. When I hit 40, I looked at my 30-year-old body and said, dang, I looked really good back then. What? And I started realizing that I always hated my today body and I envied my yesterday body. But when I was in my yesterday body, it was a today body and I hated it then.
Yeah, I remember having a conscious thought in college, where you're still self-conscious about your body, but I was bothered about something. And I remember looking at my legs and being like, one day I'm really going to wish I had these legs back. Right. And I will tell you right now, dude, those 20-year-old gams that I had all like sculpted out and like slenderly fantastic. Somebody throw those back on my body. Like it totally was there, but I still could not like avoid or run from that voice that just kept being like, yeah, but you got this.
And I always have thought that my hips were a curse, that my body was a wrong body. And I hid it and I was ashamed of it. And
the 90s did us no favors because like the styles of the 90s and grunge, I mean, I actually quite enjoyed. They follow me through my life, the big and baggy and, cozy. So, I mean, it was a love-hate relationship.
Oh, absolutely. But it also gave fodder to the hiding of the body, right? And then at the same time, it was the era of Kate Moss.
Yes.
And like low-rise jeans that work on exactly like 4% of the population,
Yeah, the girls in magazines were not wearing the latest grunge fashions.
No. So it was this contradiction of messaging, and the messaging has always been, your body isn't good enough, work harder. Why are you working so hard? Are you vain? Right? So it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't. We've always been caught in this no matter what you do, you lose.
You're listening to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher. We'll be back right after this.
If you're enjoying this topic today, might I recommend a few others from the archive? Check out the one right before this, episode 27 with Jody Hildebrandt on the stories we tell ourselves and getting to the truth. I think you'll also love episode 15 with Debbie Reber on raising differently wired kids, optimism, and the word instead. And because we're talking about our bodies, let's throw in that classic Gabby Blair episode number 13, where we talk all about women, abortion, and birth control. It's a barn burner. I think that should keep you busy for a while. You can find links to those and more at todaysmama.com/podcast.
And now back to the Today's Mama podcast with your host, Rachel Hersher.
Now, your body went on to do something pretty amazing. You gave birth to an 11-pound baby naturally.
I am a superhero.
For real. Now, I'm going to read this back to you, and then I'm going to let you respond to this for me. All right, here are your words. I gave birth to my 10-pound, 11-ounce son naturally. I'll never forget the moment when my doctor looked me straight in the eyes and said to me through gritted teeth and clenched fists, "Make it hurt more." I had been pushing, and my guy was not moving. Everybody in the room was scared. He was big. When she told me to make it hurt more, I let go of my fear of pain, and I got primal. I let out a mighty roar that I swear could be heard around the world, and I pushed that baby out. After that, I became my own hero, and I realized that there is absolutely nothing I cannot do. I read that, and I wanted to yell out a primal scream for you. Second of all, who yells "make it hurt more" to inspire someone? But it actually worked. Yeah. What did you learn about the fear of pain and just like embracing it to move through it?
That was one of those moments in my life where like everything shifted. And I knew that I was going into this pregnancy there was a lot of risk because I was measuring something like 49 weeks pregnant. That's not even a human thing. I mean, it was ridiculous. People are like, how many babies you got in there? 7? And I'm like,
oh my gosh,
this is one big baby. He was huge. And I wasn't even, I can't even, I was like, I was so
there are no
gigantic.
words to describe.
There are no words. People would just look at me and go, oh, honey. Like that's all I would get. It was so funny. But I because I had a midwife, but the doctor was there as well because they were sure that I was going to need a C-section. And I was like, I can do this. My body can do this. I know I can do this. And so they were advocating for C-section. I was advocating for a natural childbirth, even though I knew he was mega. And there was a point where everybody got a little nervous because he wasn't moving. But he was already kind of like that halfway point where you're like, you got to commit at this point. You know what I mean? Like I had to commit because he wasn't coming back out the other way. Like he was engaged.
He'd gone down the path.
He'd gone down the path and there was no getting him back out the other way. So it could have been dangerous, right? So I had my midwife on one end and the doctor grabbed my hand, looked into my eyes. She just said to me and she was like, make it hurt more. But I knew that what she was saying was you can't avoid this pain. You have to go into the pain. You can't be afraid of it because that is going to that's going to stop this from happening. The only thing that's going to stop this from happening right now is your fear of the pain. I had to tap into something like straight up Hollywood to like get that guttural, like, to just push in, to lean into the worst pain. I didn't know a body could experience that kind of pain. I had a natural childbirth before. I thought I knew what pain was. It's not the same. It's different when you have an 11-pounder.
I am clenching my fists and biting my lip and like almost in the fetal position while I'm listening to this.
But I did the thing. I went into the pain. I experienced the greatest pain of my entire life. And then I experienced the greatest pride of my entire life. And the moment he came out, it was like celebration. I mean, I born a 3-month-old, right? He was mega. All the newborn clothes I brought with me to the hospital, he couldn't wear them. They didn't fit. Like they were all too small. So, I mean, he went right into 3-month clothing. And it was me being able to lean into the pain, do something really hard that shifted the course of my life, where I realized that I could do hard things and survive. And it was going to be fine. Right. And that's a pretty powerful thing, right? Make it hurt more.
For real. Well, and you answered the question I had for you next, which was what was on the other side of the pain? And you said there was pride, there was celebration. I have to think there was exhaustion. There was probably some sleep, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That just is incredible. Make it hurt more.
Make it hurt more. It was a pure exhilaration. And I remember I felt a little bit like a superhero. People were coming into my room, like the next shift, the nurses were coming in and they were like, are you the one? And I would say, yes, I was the one. It was like, that was me. That was me. And it felt good to be, and I still will see my midwife in town and he's 6 years old and she had been midwifing for a long time. And she said, he's still the biggest baby I ever helped deliver. And I was like, yes, I'm still holding the record,
Yes, that little champion.
Yeah. And I know women have given birth to bigger babies, but for me, it was definitely, and it also helped me, didn't heal. It helped me with my relationship with my body because it kind of proved that these hips of mine that I've been criticizing for a long time had a purpose.
Yes.
This mama had birthing hips like nobody's business, I can tell you. So it helped me move towards accepting my body for sure.
I like that you say that it helped, but it did not heal because there was more to do from that point, right? So many of us as moms go from doing something really cool, like growing an actual human in our body, and we feel triumphant for a moment. And we move pretty quickly to hating those same bodies after we've had kids. So I mean, as adults and as women who've had children, there's a whole other round of accepting our bodies that we have to go through that may be even harder than adolescence. I don't know. How did you feel about your body after having kids?
I think it was, how did I feel about my body? I felt powerful and like I had an amazing body for about a minute. It moved me more toward body, sort of that body confidence or no confidence. I hadn't gotten there yet. I can say this is sort of my trajectory. My next step after doing this was feeling like a complete revolutionary and deciding that I have such an amazing body. I can wear a tankini that covers me from my knees to my neck. So I went from not wearing a bathing suit, not doing anything at all, to feeling so confident in my body that I wore a tankini with like the shorts, the long shorts and the tank that covers, so I'm still covered. But I was like, look at me, I'm a revolutionary woman loving my body. And it wasn't and so I stood in my tankini and I was pretty proud of myself until it occurred to me that my tankini was just another level of shame. I peeled back a little bit of the shame and I went from no bathing suit to mommy's too hot, mommy's too cold, I love water. I grew up on the lake, right? And
I'm on my period. I can't get in.
Every excuse in the book. Mama's tired, mama has a headache, the water's too cold, the water's too warm. Everything. I could come up with every excuse. And so I stopped with the excuses and I got in the water.
Yes.
But I still got in the water hesitantly, and I would walk carefully. You know what I mean? Like, okay, if I walk, I got to make sure that my legs don't touch, and I can't sit and I can't cross my legs.
How's my thigh gap?
How's all the things, right? Like, don't run because then you'll jiggle and that'll rip. So I still had all that, but I felt triumphant. And I remember when I went, my journey is pretty fresh. It was a few years ago. Raisa, my daughter, and I had gone to Mexico together, and I wore my tankini on the beach, and I looked around and I was the only person wearing a tankini on the beach in Mexico. And for the first time in my life, I was embarrassed of my bathing suit and not of my body. And I was it was like really covery. And I felt as though I was contributing to body shame by wearing something that was trying to hide my body, when there were women that had far more curves on their bodies that were wearing stringy bikinis. And the thought that was in my mind is, what message am I sending to them saying my body, the way my body is, doesn't deserve to be seen. It needs to be covered, but you're out there. So that's when I I started realizing that my own body shame was me contributing to the body shame movement. I was becoming complicit in body shame instead of fighting against it, because I still believed my body was a body that needed to be hidden.
Believing our bodies need to be hidden out of that shame. That, I think, is what we're all,
out of shame,
most women, a whole lot of women, are dealing with.
Yeah, it's powerful. And it's because we all think, not we all, I have to be careful, not everybody, because many women, most, I would say, many think that their body is a problem. The way that their bodies prevent them from showing up in their life the way that they want to show up is astounding to me. And I never understood how pervasive it was, how paralyzing it was, how detrimental it was, how oppressive it was, until I started to recognize the way that I viewed my body and how I contributed to the body shame movement by being ashamed of my body.
I think this is an obvious answer to this question, but I'm just going to ask it. What's the message we're sending our kids, and specifically our daughters?
Oh, absolutely. I can't even with the like, honey, your body's fine the way it is, but mama, why won't you wear a bathing suit? Right? Like, what message are we sending to our children? We can give all the lip service we want about telling their kids your body's not a problem, and then you won't go swimming at the beach with your kids, or you won't jump on the trampoline because you're afraid of what your legs are going to look like, or you won't wear shorts because nobody needs to see those legs, or you won't wear short sleeve shirts because nobody wants to see your bat wings, or you won't do this.
Your bat wings. Right? I have never heard that term.
Oh, I've heard them all, let me tell you.
Oh my gosh. All I know is that my kids think my arms are really soft like a pillow, and they've really enjoyed them lately. Don't miss part 2 of this interview. We're just getting started. Be sure to hit that episode for more on how having a daughter who was born with a host of medical issues pushed Stasia to push further into her own body acceptance. That one will leave you in tears, the good kind, I promise. You can find that episode on todaysmama.com/podcast or next up on whatever app you're listening on. Be sure to like and subscribe and leave us a review. You can also find the show notes and more episodes at todaysmama.com/podcast.
You've been listening to the Today's Mama podcast with Rachel Hersher. To find out more, go to todaysmama.com. That's todaysmama.com. Today's Mama, connecting moms and families with the best of today.